Here we are. Massive welcome to all of our subscribers, first-time viewers and LinkedIn lurkers to a very special episode focusing on our guest's expertise and experience in cybercrime, Daniel Garnham from Gentium UK Cyber. Daniel's got 20 years experience in law enforcement, specialising in cyber training, and is an expert in the field of cybercrime methodologies and typologies for the Global Online Harm Alliance, providing expert advice and training to global partners into investigations of all types of online harm, including cyber-enabled romance fraud, human trafficking, and child sexual exploitation. A trainer and advisor to Interpol, Council of Europe, the CEELI, and the American Bar Association in cyber investigations, the dark web, and the criminal exploitation of virtual currencies and blockchain technology. Providing training on a domestic and international basis to investigation teams throughout the world, an ex-UK police officer with 20 years service investigating cybercrimes and providing trauma support after terrorist incidents. I think you'll all agree this is going to be a great one. But before we bring Daniel on and hear more about his journey and the work that he's doing at Gentium UK Cyber, for those that don't know, I'm your host, Simon Linstead, and by sharing stories and best practice over the last few months has led to over 190,000 views here on YouTube by you, our amazing 9,332 subscribers. So thank you. And this has led to InfoSec Live being a media partner this year for RSA in San Francisco. And I'm going to be hosting vendor interviews from the 7th to the 8th of May, 7th to the 9th of May. So if you are a vendor and interested in having an interview, reach out to me either through here on the booking page on RSA's site, just search for InfoSec Live. Before we move on, one other thing I just want to bring up quickly. It's important to remember where all this has come from, really. All of this has come from the InfoSec Live community, which began back in 2021, where we have study groups, mentor sessions, and regular networking events to help you raise your game in cybersecurity, no matter what stage you are in your career, giving you the opportunity to network with now over 6,000 cyber professionals around the world. We'd love to see you there. If you're brave enough to scan the QR code, please do. It is safe. If not, there is a link in the description for you to join the community as well. Let's get rid of that. There we go. So if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell to be notified of future content. Each and every one of our live shows gives you, our audience, the chance to engage with our guests. So make sure you drop any questions you may have in the chat. Time for me to stop running on. Let's bring Daniel on. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Simon. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Yes, very well indeed.
So I've been excited about this since we first spoke, and I obviously know quite a bit about your background. I've mentioned a few bits in the intro there, but I'd love to start with you telling our audience a little bit more about, I suppose, what drove you to join the police force in the first place, a bit about your career, and then we'll get on to the point of when you transitioned across, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's only when I hear you listing out all those sort of like qualifications and achievements that it kind of makes me sort of take stock of what I've done over the last 20 years. But yeah, I mean, my background, 20 years in the British Transport Police, which is a national police force for the UK, looking after the UK's critical national infrastructure on the railway level. Now, I joined at 19 years old, so I was pretty young. I was fresh out of college. And it's just one of those things where I knew from a very young age I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to be that person who could help others. And basically, I think I saw too many movies and thought that is exactly how it's going to be. I was also
was it not?
Sometimes, but they didn't tell you about all the paperwork. You never see that in the movies. But I was also one of those children, an ADHD sufferer, and I was always kind of put in that the naughty bracket. So
join the club.
when I told the teachers I wanted to be a police officer, they kind of just laughed at me. But I suppose that spurs you on to want to do something
Do you know?
even
Do you
more.
know what, Daniel? It does. I remember because I used to get in quite a bit of trouble at school for the same reasons, and I remember my form tutor saying to me about 6 months before I left school, "You're never going to amount to anything." Really, really putting me down, and that was probably the biggest driver for me moving forward, not to be a loser.
Yeah, it's certainly a motivator.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I went to college and studied public services, which gave me a bit of an insight to law enforcement. And then I joined as a regular police officer in 2002, and left in 2022. Now, in that time, you kind of do a little bit of everything, and you kind of see where your specialisms lay. And very early on, I knew I was a good investigator, and I was also a good teacher. So I was taking the younger constables, probationers under my wing, and showing them how to make their first arrest and how to complete paperwork to go to court and convict these bad guys. And then I moved into the teaching side of law enforcement. So all of the new recruits, this was digital training specialisms, where I would go around the country to teach other police officers how to use all the latest digital technology that we had in order to fight crime. So, this was with the introduction of tablets and mobile phones and getting rid of the sort of pen and paper kind of things and being more digital.
No more little black notebook in the top pocket. Is that the
No,
case?
absolutely not. Absolutely
Am I
not.
showing my
So,
Am I showing my age there a bit? Maybe.
yeah, definitely. So we kind of streamlined and digitalized all our police investigations, and I was there to sort of like the forefront of that, really, to help out and make sure that that was put across to
And
the rest of the
how
officers.
and how was that? Because people, as a rule, are very reluctant and averse to change.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, absolutely. We changed our systems, our RMS system that we changed so that all of our investigations were held online rather than in paper form. And yeah, absolutely, trying to go across a national force and getting everyone to adopt it was quite difficult. But there's a mixture because you've got your mixture of ages and ability within the
yeah.
police. So I think in the few years that I was doing it, we ended up having a really good adoption rate, and it was really good fun going around the country and teaching the cops how to utilize this, and seeing the look on their faces at first with the trepidation, but then seeing how they adopted it and showing them how that actually it can help them and save some time. Then actually they were adopting it quicker than I assumed so, or at least the force assumed so. So that was really good. And also around about 10 or 11 years before I left, so sort of halfway through my service, I became a trauma manager. So this was
What
looking,
does that mean?
so a trauma incident manager was looking after the welfare of your fellow police officers. It was a bit of a signpost, to a bit of an arm around the shoulder and say, look, you may have dealt with something, whether it's in your personal life or in your work life, that's pretty harrowing. And, these are the places you can go to seek help. And that was rolled out very slowly at first, but then we started having more major incidents, terror attacks in London and the Manchester Arena attack in
Yeah.
2017. And I was the trauma incident manager for that one.
Oh
And
wow.
it was, again, for me, it was a privilege to be able to be there in the aftermath of such a terrible incident, but to be able to be there to help the police officers that had obviously been first responders, seen terrible things, had to try and preserve life and give life-saving aid, and then they're expected to go home at the end of the night and switch off as if nothing
And
had happened
is
to
that
their
was that
family.
a fairly new role or part of the? You don't think they're allowed to call it the police force anymore? Is it the police service? I'm meant to say. I think. But so the kind of trauma management part. I mean, from personal experience, never been in the police. My father-in-law is a retired police officer. From what he's told me, I don't think he got that kind of support. And I know for a fact that he really struggles with PTSD and some mental health issues now off the back of it. So it's amazing to hear that you're at the forefront of bringing in that change, Daniel.
Yeah, I was one of the first ones that got trained up in my force. Like I say, that was 12 years, 13 years ago now. And it was slow to begin with. And also with cops, they're a bit wary of who they talk to and what they say,
Yeah.
because there's still stigma attached to it, and whether that's going to remain confidential. And, we had to gain a lot of trust. But when the big incidents were happening, whether it be the Croydon derailment, whether it be incidents on train tracks, or the incident at Manchester, it soon changed people's opinions and minds about how the
Oh,
trauma
yeah.
management can work. And actually, yes, a lot of people were able to get help through partners with the police and also their own GP, which I think they may have been reluctant to, or may not have got in the first place if this wasn't put in place.
I think, I mean, speaking for the male part of the population, we're never particularly good at going to the GP for advice, are we? We kind
Yeah,
of shy away from that. Although my only experience of that after suffering alcohol addiction a few years ago now, when I went to speak to the doctor to get some help for that, and when I say help, I mean counselling kind of support. The first thing they did was try and throw a packet of tablets across
yep.
the desk at me, which wasn't really what I wanted. And I know we're going off subject here, but as a society, we rely heavily on all sorts of pharmaceutical drugs that perhaps there are better ways to deal with, but we won't get into that. I'll let you get back to your story before I start moaning about the NHS.
No, but it's true. Yeah, a lot of police officers were reluctant to open up and talk about their feelings. They were going home, they were bottling it up, not being able to speak to friends and family because,
Yeah,
again, some of the incidents they would have dealt with would have been quite confidential and sensitive as
of
well.
course, yeah.
So they really had no place to turn. And a lot of people were going off sick with stress, anxiety, PTSD, and it was affecting not just my force, but others as well. So I think that, once there was a buy-in with that, and it became more of a widespread thing that was rolled out at such incidents, I think it helped a lot, and it helped
Yeah,
me because I was getting secondhand kind of PTSD from it, because
of
even
course.
though I may not have attended the particular incident, I was
You're
listening to
reliving it.
I was
Yeah.
reliving it. I was listening to 100, 200 officers telling me their version of events, and I could have been there the way that they were telling me. So, I know that it was important to be able to look after, their mental health, my mental health. And that's where my role in the police changed from being a frontline officer that was helping members of the public to actually taking a step back and being more of a teacher and a mentor in the police, and actually looking after police officers' well-being. And that's how it changed towards the end, really.
And is that how you ended your career with the police? Is that the role you were doing when you left?
Yeah, I was doing some cybercrime investigations, helping out with the MIT team, whilst being a digital trainer. So I got my teaching qualifications, I got my cyber qualifications, and that helped me a lot. I got to the 20-year mark in policing, and it was a case of, I'm 40 years old almost. Am I going to carry on for another 10 years and say, right, that's my 30 years in policing done?
Yeah,
And
just for another 10 years in the final salary scheme that's been reduced down no end the last decade.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely. So, am I going to do that, or am I going to have a crack at something different? And a year previous, my wife had left the police. She'd been in 15 years as well. So she'd left, and she was getting on great with her job. So I thought, what, maybe there is another life out there for me. And I'm glad I did, because then all of a sudden I met some other great people that are ex-police officers. I started the Gentium UK Cyber, and as you said at the beginning intro, I'm going around the world now teaching law enforcement all sorts of things, but primarily about cybercrime investigations and digital forensics.
I wanna move on to the work that you're doing at Gentium, because I'm fascinated by some of the story. I don't know how many of them you can tell on here, but you've told me kind of off camera. But let's see what we can discuss. But before that, there's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to just ask you quickly, both from Prashant actually. Thanks, Prashant. I appreciate it. First one is this one. Second one's quite amusing. First one's, outside ransomware, is cybercrime getting more dangerous today compared to 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely getting more dangerous. It's getting more widespread as well. Look, technology moves on at such a fast pace. So compare what we can do now to what we could have done 20, 30 years ago. You know, a cyber-enabled crime, as we call it now, is much more sophisticated. So outside of ransomware, you've still got distributed denial of service attacks. You've still got the phishing attacks is just absolutely rife, isn't it? I don't know about
Yeah,
you, but I open up my inbox and
every
every
day.
day there's 100 phishing emails that I
We
know
must
straight
we
away.
must have subscribed to the same dodgy websites in the past, Daniel. I feel.
And this is what I tell other law enforcement. You know, it's not usually us, although human error plays a lot in cyber crime. You know, it could be that we've trusted our details with a third party, an organization that we may have booked a hotel room with or signed up to a fitness app or something, and it's
Yeah.
them that have been breached and they've lost our details rather than
I'm
something.
blaming. I'm going to name them. I'm blaming my fitness pal. Actually, that's why I keep getting it, because I know for a fact from
Yeah,
looking on the website that they're one of the ones that
absolutely.
my my old
That's what I was
passwords.
alluding to.
Yeah. I'll get
Yeah.
sued by them now, no doubt. So just make sure that was me who said that, not you, Daniel. The other question from Prashant, I think it might be a bit tongue in cheek, but it might not. It's a decent question. Have you ever been tempted post police service force to go to the dark side? I don't know what you mean by dark side of the law. Oh, the dark side of the law. Okay. Or the wrong side of the law. Have you ever thought about being a criminal? I think is the question.
No, never thought about being a criminal, but there's certainly a lot less restrictions on your private life now.
Less
So,
reporting?
sorry?
There'd be much less reporting, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll always live a law-abiding citizen life, but yeah, absolutely. I'm not looking over my shoulder every time I do 3 miles over the speed limit.
I am. I got I did a speed awareness course. I got caught going 34 and a 30 about 7 or 8 months ago. And it was on the way back. This is my excuse, and it's a good one. I was visiting my dying mother at the time, and I wasn't really paying attention. You could argue I shouldn't have been driving. And then I did the course, and literally 4 weeks later, on the way back from the hospital again, I went past the same bloody fixed camera doing 34 miles an hour again. So I've actually got 3 points on my license for that at the moment, which is very, very sad. So I am looking over my shoulder all the time at the moment and driving like an octogenarian, I think is
Yeah.
pretty much where I'm with it. There's another, hi Kay, nice to see you. There's another really good question here actually. What types of skills do you look for in digital forensic investigators above what you learn in college or certification programs?
So what I'm looking for, and I've just come back from Pakistan, where for 2 weeks I've been teaching the anti-narcotic police force over there on how to entwine digital forensics and digital investigations into their traditional investigations into human trafficking and drug trafficking. So all I was looking for in them was the ability to want to learn, because sometimes we get bogged down in the technical, you know, this is what a network this, or this is what a motherboard does in computers science, bits and pieces. So although yes, look, if you want a career in digital forensics, you are going to need to go to university and have that kind of degree that backs up the computer science side of it. But really, we're just looking for people that can, you know, work a digital machine and have that outside the box thinking to go, well, do you know what, this is the area of the phone that I need to interrogate, and it's going to be the messaging apps, the social media, it's going
Yeah.
to be the cameras and stuff like that. It's going to, what we're looking for is, okay, can you identify where important information may be held, and then how do you retrieve that information? How do you retrieve that information in a way that, in an investigation, could you then describe that as a step-by-step basis in layman's terms to a judge or a jury who will
Yeah.
have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to computer networks or
And how much reliance is there on that? So this is an interesting point I want to dig into. So you often, you watch, whether it's television or a real courtroom experience, you see lots of technical type evidence presented. There's not always much of an explanation around how we know that's right and how we know it, or how we know it isn't. How much detail do you have to go into with a jury or a judge? Is it high level, or do you have to get a bit deeper?
it's high level, but you present it in such a way that anyone could understand it.
Okay.
What we teach our law enforcement is they must keep a log, like a diary, of everything they've done. So if they've been able to access someone's digital device and obtain a piece of evidence which may be incriminating, then we need that documented. So to a point where you're saying, at this time and date, I logged onto the device. These are the buttons I pressed. This is the process I used in order to find and retrieve that information. And as long as you've got that diary, which is a step-by-step guide, but basically means that if the judge or jury
You've got a
had that piece of
chronology of,
paper, they could
yeah,
follow the steps that you took
yeah.
and come to the same conclusion.
So I suppose in answer to Kai's question, another skill would be the ability to document and
Yeah,
recall that
accuracy.
information, which is something that not everyone's got. I mean, if I had a black notebook and you asked me to take notes, I don't think either of us by the end of page 3 would be able to read what I'd written, I think is the problem.
Yeah, so definitely, it's got to be legible, it's got to be accurate, and concise, and easy to follow. So yeah, there's yes, you can go to university, get yourself your degree, but actually when you're in the field and you're doing it, there's a lot of other practical, things that you've got to take into account. But yeah,
Thanks,
great
Daniel.
question.
Was a great question. Thank you, Kai. Next thing that we haven't really talked about is we've talked about you leaving the police and a bit about what you're doing now. We haven't talked about the transition, and I think the transition will be interesting for a lot of people. I know in the community we've got current law enforcement in the US looking to transition. We've got people in accountancy looking to transition. We've got one guy's a chef looking to come across. How did you? I mean, you'd had some cyber experience in your police role, but how did you know what it was you were going to do, and how did the transition look? What did it look like? What happened?
So I had no idea how I was going to transition and what it was going to be like. I felt institutionalized. I joined at 19 years old and I left at almost 40. I'd spent more of my life being a police officer than I had not being a police officer. So
Wow, yeah.
I was a little scared, about what was going to happen next. Um, so I think what happened, and I was lucky, is I ended up when I left, I ended up doing some work at Arden University as a lecturer, associate lecturer in cybercrime and criminology, and that really cemented for me the fact that I loved the role of teaching.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to be that teacher, that trainer. Um, like I said, I had the chance meeting with two ex-cops from up in the Leeds area, um, who had left about 4 years prior than I had taken that same leap. And it was good to have them
I
as a
bet.
mentors, as people to look up to and say, right, okay, this is how they did it, and it's worked for them as well. That through them.
Do you still keep in touch with them now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They are
Yeah.
Gentium UK Limited. I am Gentium UK Cyber Limited. So I'm
Okay.
just like a branch off them, really. And we
A
use each
very
other.
a very successful one by the sound of it, Daniel. You must be
Yeah,
very
yeah.
proud because it's such a short amount of time since you've left is it the service or the force? I need to get it right.
I call it the Force, Simon. I
Yeah,
call it the
let's stick
Force,
with the
and
force.
always will do.
Yeah,
But
good.
yeah, service is definitely something that I like to call it now. But yeah, I was able to lean on them, their contacts, and also because they were experts in anti-money laundering, fraud, and cryptocurrency, they were able to use my cyber expertise to be able to service their clients as well.
Of
So,
course.
it was a really, really good chance meeting. And again, whilst I was doing that teaching and meeting those and kind of seeing where we could work together, I ended up doing some work with the SIA, the Security Industry Authority,
Yeah.
and I was teaching their courses in CCTV. I took my CCTV and door supervisor course, not because I wanted to go into security per se, and be the door supervisor or be a CCTV operator, because again, I felt like I had done that in that previous life. I did it because I wanted to be a teacher of it. So I ended up teaching the CCTV course to prospective license holders. And it was from there that I ended up having a conversation with the delegates, and they were sort of like complaining about the security industry and how, this could be better, or low wages, poor poor working conditions.
Yeah.
And, my kind of go-to remark was, well, you need to go and speak to your trade union. In the police, we don't have a trade union, but we have a federation. We have someone that we can at least go to, and they can try and fight our corner if we're not happy. Now, they said, well, look, there are trade unions out there we can join, but there's not one solely for the security industry. So I kind of went home that evening, thoughts going around my head, thinking, well, how hard can it be? And look, 2 years later, I'm now the founder and president of the Security Industry Federation, which is the trade union solely for security in the UK. And now we've got hundreds of security workers around the UK that are part of our union, and they rely on us for everything I was saying about the poor working conditions, poor pay, and the bad practices within the industry, because there's quite a few, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And as they
is this the physical security industry you're talking about, cyber,
yes.
or both?
So both. So we service both the physical security, so the security guards that you see on the door at a Sainsbury's or a Tesco or a bar or a nightclub, as well as the CCTV operators that you won't see, and the cyber security experts as well. So it's all encompassing. So I kind of felt like.
And what was the name of that? Because I want to drop the link in the chat, Daniel.
Yeah, that's the Security Industry Federation.
Thank you. I'll do that now. You mentioned about bad practices. What immediately sprang to mind is I know a few people who work on the doors in a certain city in the east of England, and I think out of the 30 that I know, 28 of them are crooks. If I'm honest. And I think they make a lot of their money. I mean, I won't get into this. I don't want to stop bad-mouthing people, but it's quite corrupt. Some of those firms are quite corrupt, and they control a little bit of organised crime in some locations as well. So a little bird has told me.
There's a lot that's had to be done over the last few years in the private security industry to shape it to what it is at the moment. And it's by no way is perfect. But if you think about 25 years ago, when you had bouncers, as we called them.
And that there was a reason they were called that as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely got a bad reputation, and a lot of crime and criminal activity was taking place in these venues. But now, the SIA as a licensing and as the overall kind of overseer of security, they have come in and they're trying to professionalize it. It's been a slow process, but we've trying to shake off those shackles. But I feel that the Security Industry Federation Trade Union and what I'm doing with Gentium links really, really well, just because on the fact that we can also service our cybersecurity workers and give them a trade union that is solely for them as well.
And you mentioned you mentioned it the first time we spoke, when I remembered it, and you mentioned it again off camera before we started. With being a member of this trade union body, you can access some mental health support as well, which I think is absolutely amazing. So I'm going to be promoting it within the InfoSec Live community. I'm going to be joining it myself. There's the link. I hope it's the right one, by the way. I've put the link in the chat. If it isn't, it is. Yeah. Definitely check it out. I'm conscious of time. I said we only had 30 minutes. We're going to need more than that, because we've got a couple of questions in here, and I want to talk to you a bit more about Gentium. Are you okay for another 5 minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just one thing I'll just end up off on the SIF is the fact that you mentioned it there about the mental health awareness. Coming from that trauma management background and seeing the effect that it has on people, the first thing I did when I set up the trade union was made sure that we partnered with a company called Care First, and they offer 24/7 counselling and wellbeing advice. Now that's by the telephone, so it could be 3 a.m, it could be 3 p.m. If you needed a counsellor, not just a voice to talk to, but a properly trained counsellor, they are there on the phone for you 24/7. And actually, if they think that if you ask for it, or if they think that you need face-to-face counselling, because there is a difference between telephone counselling and face-to-face counselling, then they will give you face-to-face counselling in the town or city where you live within 48 hours. Now, we know that if we went to our GP and said, look, I really need some counselling, they'd put you on a list that's about 9 months, 12 months long.
And if you want to get a tooth extracted, it's about 3 years here in the UK for people watching in the States,
Yeah,
which is why us
absolutely.
British people have such bad teeth. Just like to cover
Well,
that
we'll
off.
have to make next thing we'll have to do is we'll have to make sure we partner with a dentist. But
That's true. You're not going to find one, I don't think.
no,
It's an impossible task. Before we dig into Gentium, there's a couple of questions in the chat, or there's one question and a couple of comments. The first one I want to bring up is Prashant's because it's quite amusing, and I agree with him. Police service is like serving food with a controlled mentality. Police force is like a proper name. Yes, Prashant, I completely agree with you. You can't have the word police
yeah,
service. It's
absolutely. I mean,
nonsense.
look, when I was in policing and now in security, I like my security and I like my police officers to do the job that they've been trained to do and what they're paid to.
Yeah,
There's no point standing back and allowing criminal activity to happen. And that's
no.
unfortunately what we're seeing at the moment in security with the retail sector. We're
Oh,
allowing
don't.
people to go into shops and raid the shelves and come back out with bags full of meat and champagne, and the security guards are left kind of standing there twiddling their thumbs watching them. And that's because of policies and the not wanting to look bad or not wanting to be
I mean,
attacked.
it's policies, and it's also the absolutely jam-packed backlog court system that we've got in the UK. I
Yeah,
think at the
absolutely.
moment, where we've had to make decisions on pursuing some crimes over others, right, down to severity. And my wife, when I destroyed our lives back in, we won't go into that, 2019, she went and got a job in retail to support our family for a year while I got better. And she worked in, I'll tell you what, it's Boots the chemist. She worked as a manager at the weekends, and they didn't even report the shoplifters. They were told to ignore them and just let them walk out of the shop. So why have you got 6 security guards sitting upstairs watching the CCTV and another 6 walking around the shopping centre if they're not allowed to do anything? It just seems so
Yeah,
unfair to everyone,
absolutely.
doesn't
And
it?
as a trade union, we find ourselves dealing with a lot of disciplinary meetings due to the fact that security guards have dared really to do the job they're paid to do.
Yeah, it's not fair, is it? It's not
But
fair.
I'm glad, for me, I'm glad that we're there for them so that they've got that someone in their corner.
I think it's fantastic. I've met actually the owner at a football club shooting event I went to a few weeks ago. A massive security organisation in the UK. They've got, I think, 7 or 8 different locations. I'll send you an email afterwards with his contact details to see if they've joined or not, because he would be a good one for you. He's one
Yeah,
of the
sure.
only people I've met who doesn't seem like a crook, who's running doors, so he could be quite a good
Okay.
one. Next question: Are serving police officers allowed to be security guards? Because in the US, you can have second jobs, right? I don't know if you can in the UK.
Yeah, in the US and Canada, they on their days off they'll go and stand outside a liquor store and
Or sell property. Yeah.
yeah. So, but no, in the UK, it's seen as a conflict of interest. Now, there are special constables that volunteer police officers
Yeah.
that may have a job in security during the day, so to speak, and then will go and be a police officer at the weekend or in the evening. So it'll be on a sort of like case by case, depending on what they do within security.
And dare I ask the personal question of how you felt when they brought in PCSOs? Because I know from some police officers I've spoken to, they weren't terribly pleased.
Yeah, and that was the feeling around my police station when it happened. But I was quite new in service. I was just about 2 years in service when they brought in police community support officers. So it was the ones that were much older in service than me at the time
Yeah.
that were against it. Whereas really, I hadn't had too much
No.
difference
And I
to
think
compare it
anything
to.
that gives more police presence on the streets, because I think that's what we miss as a society. Well, I think that's what a lot of people miss as a society. Is used to have, back in the good old days, the local Bobby on the beat that everyone knew. I remember when we were teenagers, I won't mention his name, but there was one police officer who we used to hang around up at the local recreation ground. And he'd come up, but he'd be lovely to us. We weren't really doing too much wrong. I mean, on
Yeah.
occasion, maybe, but we became quite friendly with him and we respected him. You just don't see that anymore, do you? It's a shame,
No,
really.
no, and that's absolutely how it should be. You've firm but fair. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you shouldn't not be able to approach the police officer just because they're there to uphold the law. But yeah, you don't get that anymore, unfortunately, because I know now from people, my friends that are still in the police force, You know, they're far too busy sitting at hospitals with mental health patients or being in custody. And
Again, they've got like the ambulance service. I'm going off on a tangent now. Having my mum passing away last year, for the 2 years before that, she was hospitalised on a number of occasions, and it was only the ambulance service who saved her in so many ways. They were the ones who put in a report to make sure they didn't send her home after hospital again. They were acting as counsellors, mental health officials, you know, as the police
yeah,
are at the moment. They're kind of swamped with everything. I'm digressing though. Let's ask a cyber question quickly before I get you to talk about Gentium. So Kai has asked a question. What new cybercrime trends are you seeing now besides ransomware or drug/human trafficking?
yeah. So at the moment, and I'm part of the Global Online Harm Alliance, and which is really combating romance fraud, or pig butchering, whatever you want to call it now.
What did you say? Pig butchering.
Pig
What's that?
butchering. Yeah, so pig butchering is the name that they're giving romance scams or sweetheart scams at the moment. And it is likening to, fattening someone up ready to be, slaughtered.
Oh, I've got it now.
So,
Yeah.
it's quite a sort of like, a vile depiction of what they're actually doing. But the sextortion side of romance fraud is what we're really seeing as a trend at the moment. Now, you may have seen on the news that there is a gang in Africa called the Yahoo Boys,
Yep.
and they're targeting a lot of North American teenagers. And they're actually employing females, models, to speak
To get
um,
genitalia pictures, isn't it? I think.
yes, to speak
Yeah.
to sort of teenagers and young men in particular. And once they start swapping pictures, again, of nudity, then they will all of a sudden turn into, actually, it's not who you think you're speaking to. This is who you're speaking to, and we're now going to push this all over your social media. Your parents are going to see it. Your friends are going to see it. And in North America, teenagers have been taking their lives
Yeah.
over the last 12 months.
It's
Um,
a CISO friend of mine. I won't mention where he lives in case in case anyone hears this story. He had to jump in with one of his friend's sons who got caught up in that about 9 months ago, and he ended up digging him out of a really big hole. He'd already parted with some money, but then
yep.
it doesn't stop there, does it? Because once you've parted with some money, it just never stops. And they kept coming back at him. And fortunately, they were able to step in before anything like that happened, because you can see what the next, taking your own life could happen so easily, couldn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
Itza, good to
absolutely.
see you, Itza. She's put people are lonely, and people are lonely. But as Prashant said, it's not just a case of being lonely, but a case of being duped into a false sense of security without knowing what's going on. And that's back to the whole education piece, which I hope leads on to the work that you're doing at Gentium. Daniel, tell us a little bit about that. Seamless, that wasn't it? Like
Yeah,
practice.
absolutely. So last year I spent quite a bit of time in Africa with Ghanaian police force, Rwanda, Nigeria, and basically they asked for our help to go over there because they recognise that a lot of the crime is originating from their country, and they don't want the world's fingers being pointed
No.
at them saying, oh, this is you, this is all your fault. And the police over there are actively trying to break that up and try to investigate it. But what they need is they need the tools, they need the expertise. So I've been over there, sort of gave them a masterclass, a 101 really, on what romance fraud is, how it kind of materializes, the latest trends, and given them that sort of like digital knowledge and digital forensic knowledge to how they can actually find that information once they suspect a crime's being committed. So whether that's tracing emails and IP addresses and social media profiles and usernames, etc. It's just giving them that bit of support, and through Gentium we offer that as an ongoing support. So whether that be the work I've just done in Pakistan or whether that be the work I did last year in Africa, we will always get those police forces coming back to us and asking us questions, or can we go back over there? In a couple of months' time, I'll be going over to Zimbabwe to do something again very similar, because
Amazing.
again, once they've heard of what we're doing in the region, it gets the interest of the other countries there,
Of course.
and they
Yeah.
kind of want the same as well.
It'll be
So
Nigeria next, Daniel. I've got a feeling.
Yeah, well, I've had a team of Nigerian police officers actually come to the UK
Have
for our
you?
training. Yeah, I spent some time with them a year ago in the UK, but I've got a feeling that I'll be going over there at some point as well.
I think you might be right. Quick question, personal question, I suppose. There's not enough of this kind of education for the general public, in my opinion. I don't think the government does a particularly good job of educating us or helping point us in the right direction. Any plans moving forward for you or Gentium to start educating the general public on some of these issues as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've invested a lot in gamified learning. So we're trying to make cyber and digital forensics fun. Yes, you can have me standing in a classroom and talking about the technicalities of things and being that sort of death by PowerPoint. But we've got a series of cyber escape rooms. We've got one which is general cyber awareness, another one which is open source intelligence, and then we've got two more which is about AML and fraud and cryptocurrency. So depending on what you want to learn, we've got a game for you to play where you basically step into the shoes as a detective and you're given a series of clues that you've got to solve the case. And it's all sort of like, immersive video technology, which has been filmed by real actors and actresses. So that's the route we're going down at the moment. We've got board games, cyber board games for people to play. And in fact, although they get played, these cyber escape rooms get played online and in person around the world, mostly by police forces, including here in the UK. The regional organised crime units are now using these escape rooms to train their officers. Actually, what we're trying to do is target members of the public and also, our next generation, our 15, 16, 17 year olds in high school and college. So in about 2 weeks' time, I'll be at Norwich City's football ground.
The
And
hallowed Carrow Road. Yeah, there we
yeah.
go. It's about 7 miles down the road from my house, Daniel.
Oh, but you'll have to come along now. Look.
I will.
So,
Well, I mentioned earlier that I was with a football club doing some clay pigeon shooting. That was Norwich City Football Club.
okay. Well, look, there's an
Yeah.
event there in a couple of weeks' time. I'll give you the details.
What
Come
is what
along
is the
because
event? What's the event?
it's through the EGR, which is the East of England Energy Group.
Yeah,
And what they've got, okay, yes, they've got a lot of energy companies and offshore wind companies going to be there, and it's a case of sort of bit of networking and mingling. But what
brilliant.
the EGR do is they've got like a schools and social piece. So what they're doing is they're bringing in youngsters, teenagers, to come in and learn about energy, whether they're going to take that next step into that industry once they leave school or college. But I'm going to be there with our gamified learning products, our cyber escape rooms, and board games, so that they can have a little hands-on feel of how that is as well, and see if we can get any of them interested in cyber security.
I love that. Make sure you get me have the details because I will 100% come along. I'd love to meet you in person as well, and I'd love to
Absolutely.
follow on this discussion next week off camera, as it were, to see or find out more about your gamified learning and see if there's any way we can start working that into the community and maybe helping each other a little bit. I'm super
Yeah,
excited
definitely.
about what could happen moving forward. It's been absolutely thrilling, to be honest with you, Daniel. I don't say that to many guests, but your background and experience is first class. It's been inspirational, I hope, for many people who are watching. Hopefully, those who are looking to transition in as a career, especially those who are serving police officers at the moment, will get some, I suppose, not hope's the wrong word, but gain some insight on what it was like for Daniel. And I suppose, Daniel, is it all right if I drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat if there is anyone out there who's transitioning soon from the force, sorry,
Mhm.
get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage anyone to, if they've got any questions about the private security industry, cybersecurity industry, or all that transition piece, yeah, contact me, reach out. I'll always reply.
Thank you so much. Obviously, being a 50-year-old man, it's taken me some time just to get your LinkedIn profile up. So if we could just bear with the old man at the moment. You notice I'm growing a grey beard here. Don't know if anyone can see it. It's that patchy and wispy that not many people can. But it is my first attempt at growing a beard in 50 years. So we'll see what it looks like in
Well,
when I see you in 2 weeks.
I can feel your pain. I make sure I shave it now to get rid of the grey.
It's just so itchy. I think that's the problem. But Daniel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Audience, thank you very much for tuning in. Be back in the studio next week. And Daniel, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time at the hallowed Carrow Road.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.